From the Clark Ford Studio in Oxford, Mississippi, MBW Digital proudly presents the Oxford Exxon Podcast.
I'd say thanks for tuning in, but why am I going to give you a round of applause for something you're supposed to do, to be frank?
And now, here are your hosts, Chase Parham.
And broadcast school has really paid off.
And Neil McCready.
I deserve to be on TV.
Welcome into this edition of the Oxford Exxon Podcast. Chase Parham. A little different show today. Is going to be all about the Ole Miss chancellor search and now the drama that is unfolding now that there is a chancellor in place. Adam Ganucheau of Mississippi Today joining me for the duration of this show. Adam, I know you had a late night. You were covering the debate yesterday, and then at some point you woke up to your reporting being questioned by the IHL. Probably not the first time that questions have been associated with that entity here in the last few days.
That's right. As far as I know, it's the first time that the IHL board or really any government entity I can recall sending out a mass press release like that, calling into question one specific article. So I guess that's a win for us. Happy to talk a lot about that. I've got a lot of thoughts. I've been doing a lot of reporting to sort of make sure that everything's accurate this morning. So happy to talk as much as you want to about that.
Neil and I have been kind of talking about this every day for at least a segment or two, it seems like. But let's back up a little bit. So you were sitting next to me on Friday during the attempted press conference, the one that didn't happen. We did not know it at the time. We were both kind of working on some of the same things over the weekend, coming out as far as how the process was pretty screwed up from the start, and then some of the stuff about the foundation. How would you sort of recap quickly everything that's happened in the last week from the time that you and I left each other last Friday?
It's been a PR mess. I think that's probably the one way I describe it. Like you said, sitting next to you there at that Friday press conference, that's something I'll probably never forget. I've covered a lot of press conferences. I've covered a lot of trying moments, particularly related to the University of Mississippi. I cannot remember one moment that was so, such just a disaster for the public image. I mean, when you have the police chief of the University Police Department, grabbing and wrestling through the air, young woman, a student protester, activist, I mean, on camera, there were every media outlet in the state plus Memphis was there rolling footage on that. The university, I think, had a live stream going that caught that whole thing too. Man, it was a mess. And, it's I want to say this, it's gotta be tough if you're the University of Mississippi comms people, communications people, and you're trying to figure out how to, have an event like that, an introduction and press conference for the new chancellor who had faced so much controversy just in the 24 hours or so before that. I mean, this was not their call. The university, I think, pretty much across the board, no one at the university level was involved with that search. They were essentially left with what the IHL board gave them. And they're trying to figure this out. You could have done a press conference. You could have canceled the press conference ahead of time. You could have, there's an option that you could have not let those student protesters in, which would have been a bad look. You let the protesters in, they disrupted. That was a bad look. So, man, I mean, like I said, I will never forget that. The tension in that room, the controversy that had been building up to that moment, in really just sort of a short period. It was only 24 hours, less than 24 hours before that any of us really knew that Boyce had been hired. So, that was quite the day. And then of course, they had to go regroup and figure out how to pitch this and announce this to the university family. And, it just having to do a phone call instead of a press conference. And it's just a mess. Like I said, a PR mess that, has really not subsided or seemed to have died down any since then.
Was your interview with Boyce in person on Friday?
It was. So most everyone cleared out of the inn. It was at the inn at Ole Miss on campus, the hotel, and most everyone cleared out. Police cleared the room, and reporters hung around. Like we hung around a little bit. And the communications team told us, it's going to be a phone call now. Y'all can go. I was in town. I had literally just gotten into town for the weekend. It was homecoming weekend. I was coming up for football anyways, but I had just gotten to town just in time for the start of that press conference, and I went out to my car, and I needed to write a story to put on our website about what had just happened. So I was like, I'll just go back in the lobby at the inn. I'm already parked here. I'm close to the building. I can just use the Wi-Fi at the lobby. And I went in there, and I realized that everybody was in there still. I mean, that there's a conference room off to the side of the lobby that was sort of the hub of strategy for IHL board members, both Ford Dye and Chip Morgan. They were the only two board members in those meetings trying to determine, how to move forward with the announcement and how to roll it out exactly. You had IHL Commissioner Al Rankins was in there. You had it seemed like the whole Ole Miss communications team. You had IHL communications. You had the search consultants from Bufkin Baker. They were in there. I mean, it was the crew. I mean, it was a war room in there. They were trying to figure it out. And like I said, I didn't realize they were still going to be around. I was just trying to find some internet access. I ended up sitting outside the war room for 3 or 4 hours that afternoon while I was writing. And, I got to pull some people aside, and I ran into Dr. Boyce, and I was like, hey, I'm here. Would you mind just doing this one-on-one sit-down? And he said, sure. To his credit, I mean, look, that would have been an easy time for him to say, nah, we're just going to stick with this phone call press conference we're doing with all the reporters. And but to his credit, he said, sure, you come on in, and gave me 30 minutes one-on-one in person. And that's how that interview came about.
So this is kind of a question I have, because I've heard a ton about Glenn Boyce for a long time. I don't know the man. I've never spoken to him in person. What was sort of his demeanor like? Because any of us as humans, you go through that, or you don't go through it, but you see what's going on with the protest. You see all the dissenting opinions about you. It's got to rattle you, even if you were dead set wanting that job from the beginning. Nevertheless, if you take him in any bit of his word about how he was hesitant throughout the process. And then I thought on the call that he was not prepared for some of those questions. I think he has, I wrote this on the board, and I don't mean this critically, because I have a tendency to do it sometimes too with some different words. I think he has a tick of some semblance where he says okay in the middle of sentences. Yeah. It comes off kind of condescending when I don't necessarily think that's what he's meaning. But I just thought that conference call did not go particularly well for him. How would you sort of rate his demeanor in person?
It was sort of the same. He does have that verbal tick, as you mentioned, where he does say, okay, let me tell you what I do, Adam, okay? I mean, that comes across as condescending, but in person, like face to face, I didn't get that sense. He's not being condescending. It's just the way he talks and the way he thinks. I don't know. I asked him the question. I said, I tried to humanize him, because that press phone call, it's first off, it's hard to do phone call interviews in the first place. You can't read sort of visual cues with people. You can't get a sense of body language, and it's difficult to communicate in a meaningful way over the phone like that. So I didn't necessarily fault him for it, but going into this one-on-one interview just a few minutes later I had with him, I kind of Chase, I was trying to pick up on some of that, like thinking the same thing you did about the phone call. It didn't go so great. I just wanted to sort of read him and see where he was. And one of the first questions I asked him was, there's been a lot of criticism the last 24 hours about this hire, and maybe not even about you, but about the process. What is it like for you to see that response? Because I wanted him to open up and talk about, his emotions a little bit about this. It's an emotional time for everybody. And his answer was something like, there's no question it's difficult, but he quickly shifted. So he said, yeah, it's difficult. It's not been fun. But, on the other hand, I'm here. I see it as a challenge. I'm ready to go. Generally, his demeanor, I thought, he was very matter of fact. He, if you read the Q&A, it's rare that we would ever post a long Q&A in this way. But I thought that just because people hadn't had a chance to vet him at the university level, and because I got to ask him some of these questions that I think a lot of people on campus have been wondering, we went ahead and published every word of that interview. So my question, and then every answer of his, every word of every answer. If you go back through and read that, I mean, I don't want to be too critical of him, I suppose. I mean, it's not really my job to be critical most times. he didn't answer a lot of these questions. And it wasn't necessarily that he was dodging. I got the sense that it was he didn't have a lot of information at hand to be able to answer, in an adequate way. And when that happened, sometimes he'd say that. Other times he kind of dodged the questions. But I never got the sense that he was condescending in that interview. He's a nice guy. Everybody keeps using that term, nice guy, who knows him. He is. I mean, he's personable and he's affable and, he's very just, I think just like I said, him agreeing to sit down and do that interview with me in the first place was sort of a testament to, I think, who he is. And, that's the thing about this, Chase. And I'm sure you want to talk some more about this, but, let's put Glenn Boyce aside. Let's put his qualifications aside. Let's put his demeanor and his answers to tough questions aside. It's hard to remove him and all of those qualities I just listed from the process and his direct involvement in that very process. And I know that's nothing new. I know everybody's been saying that, but I think at the end of the day, at the heart of all this is that process. And, I quoted a couple faculty members in a story. They said it might not be fair to Dr. Boyce that he's facing all this criticism, but how can we speak out against the criticism, or how can we offer words of encouragement or approval when this process was so obviously flawed?
Had he simply been an applicant, run through the process, and they picked him, he would be starting at 0 today instead of -50 with faculty, staff, stakeholders. That is the irony of this process is, yeah, maybe it was the way for the IHL to get him appointed, but it also was the way to put him in the most difficult set of handcuffs possible. And that's kind of my last question before we move into the process a little bit. And I hope this is fair because I know you're a reporter first and not a columnist or anything, but from all your reporting, because I don't understand necessarily what I think on this yet, even though I've talked to people that said, he was speaking with other candidates as late as mid-September about the position and different things from their point of view, still saying he had no interest. How long do you think Boyce was aware of what potentially was going on?
That's the $1 million question.
Okay.
I asked him that very question when I did my one-on-one. That's how the interview started. And actually, if you read the Q&A that we posted on our website, it doesn't include that stuff. And the reason it doesn't include that stuff is because, I think moving forward, we're definitely at Mississippi Today planning on doing a longer process story as we know more. I just, it's so hard to be able to report that when you don't know the process. We don't know the contract that he was given by the foundation. We don't know how long he was paid for his work and all that. But I asked him, I'm going to read this. I just pulled up the transcript here. Again, you won't see this on our website, but we're going to use it pretty soon. My first question when we first sat down, at what point did you become aware of the possibility that you could get the job as chancellor? And his answer is, as far as the possibility of it being offered to me, it wasn't until I met with the IHL board on Thursday. When he says Thursday there, that's the day that he was interviewed. That would have been October 3rd. He continued and said, as far as I knew, and I really didn't keep up with the process much, to be candid with you, they were interviewing. That's what I knew. My next question was, they called you Thursday afternoon, and that's the first time you became aware of the possibility of them hiring you? And his answer was, they called to bring me in to ask if I would come in. Now, they had asked me prior if I would consider being a candidate. I cut in. I said, when did they ask you that? He said, the first time they asked that was probably right after they hired the search firm, and it was the search consultant calling me. He said, I've heard about you and heard you did some work. I said, I did. He said, are you interested in applying? I said, no. My next question was, so you hadn't thought about it until Thursday when they called you and quickly extended you the offer? And he said, no, I would have thought about it. Sure, absolutely. I would think about it from time to time. Search consultant called me back a second time, and I don't remember when that was. Might have been a month and a half or 2 months before the end of the process. He called a second time, and he said that I was getting, around the time of the CSAC, that I was getting votes, and that I would be one of the leading vote getters even though I wasn't an applicant. He said, the consultant, would you consider it again? I said, I'm not sure at this point. I'll think about it, but I'm still of the mind that if we find the right fit, and I hope we do, I hope we'll hire the right fit. But Adam, I was very strongly attuned to the fit. I think that's very, very important. And we went back and forth a couple of more times, and he really just wasn't being super forthright about the process and the timing, and I just decided to move on in the interview.
Yeah, because at some point as a reporter, you've got to just get on with it or you're not going to have anything at all.
Look, man, I was under the impression that I might get 10 minutes with him, and I had a list. And I didn't actually have time to prepare. I mean, I learned about the interview about 5 minutes before it happened. And, I'm running on no sleep because I had to scramble to get up to Oxford earlier than I expected for the press conference. And, as we talked about, that press conference itself was crazy. And I'm literally just trying to, breathe. And then they're like, all right, let's do this, this interview if you want to. So I walk in with no notes, no questions. I sit down, and I'm just like, all right, well, I had obviously been thinking a lot about it, but I'm like, I have a mental list of probably 25 questions that I think would be great to ask him. If I dwell on this, they're going to get mad, kick me out, or he's going to end the interview early or whatever. I thought getting to those other questions was a little more important at the time. So, yeah, you're right about that.
I mean, the interview was completely meaningless, and I don't even necessarily mean that in a nefarious way. They knew the guy. They brought him in because they wanted to hire him. Other candidates had been spending weeks and weeks and weeks and answering those 10 questions that we've all seen that they sent out in those packets and all that stuff. He had none of that. He had not applied. He didn't fill out the packet. To this point, his resume hasn't been seen, and I'm not overly interested in that. You can Google him if you want to and see where he's been. But point being, at that point, it was already decided. He could have done anything in that interview, and he was still getting the job 10 minutes later, in my opinion.
I agree. I completely agree. And there's been a lot of talk about, the leaked names that came out that we published. The eight names of people the IHL board had initially decided to give interviews to. I'm happy to have a longer conversation about that if you want to, but I think, it is impossible for me at this point, looking back on everything I know, everything I've heard, and everything I've reported in the last couple of weeks, to think that Glenn Boyce was never not going to get this job. Look, this is the way that I frame it, that I think is the most direct and concise way I can think to frame this, that doesn't necessarily even shed light on the process, because it can't, but to framing it this way, it just raises so many questions. Glenn Boyce, earlier this year, he received a consulting contract to compile the profile of the perfect Ole Miss chancellor. He was contracted. He received about $87,000 from the UM Foundation to go out and talk to the most prominent and wealthy alumni, power brokers, stakeholders, potential candidates, alumni groups. We can run down this list of people he went and met with, and board members who have talked about this publicly in the recent days. His objective was to talk to all these people and compile the perfect profile of the perfect next chancellor. Several weeks later, the IHL board decided that he fit his own profile better than anybody. That's how I'm describing it, because that's exactly as it has been described to us by every official, including Boyce, involved here. It is. In what world can anybody be okay with that process? I just don't understand it. And I'm a reporter. It's my job to keep digging on this stuff, and I am. Of course, I'm not going to stop digging until hopefully we know exactly how this all went down. But if you look at it that way, which is 100% accurate, he compiled this profile, he got paid to do it, and the IHL board, the powers that be, decided that he fit his own profile better than anyone else. That's the story right there. That's the heart of it.
It's interesting to me, too, that, and we'll see as he gets the job and actually does talk about a vision, because this one, he's been very, very vague on any sort of vision. However, and you mentioned this, and this could be fair, this could be unfair, I don't know, he had a lot of answers from other high-level candidates on their visions to kind of pick and choose and take from. You know what I mean? So it's really strange to me in some ways that he's been so vague to this point on vision. Now, his mind is maybe, hey, I need to go in and ask people and really act like approval is, from stakeholders, and I need to put this forth together. But from a leadership standpoint, as much as he focuses on leadership, I do find it interesting that he would have gathered a ton of information from other candidates that were when I say strongly considered, I guess at least interviewed or gave the potential to interview more than considered because his voice was going to get it. But it's odd to me, the juxtaposition to what he kind of hasn't said yet as far as what he plans to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't really thought of it that way before. Yeah, I mean, this guy was traveling across the state and the country to talk to potential candidates.
He met with Bobby Robbins. He met with the political guys.
That's right. That's a great point. I hadn't thought of it that way. This is an interesting, just the process itself, man. Like I said, I have a list of 10,000 questions and very few answers. And the thing here is, I'm sure that a lot of people in the know who know a lot of the answers to those questions are listening to this podcast right now. The thing is, I think at the heart of this is that, everybody affiliated with Ole Miss in any way, whether it's an athletics fan, a season ticket holder, an alumni association member, a major donor of the university, or just an alumni who, is just questioning this process. I think at the heart of that is the need here for transparency. I think no matter who you are, whether you're a big Boyce supporter, whether you're a friend of these IHL board members who pushed all this through, whether you're the IHL board members themselves, the need for transparency here is so important. But it's not just that for me. I cover government and politics in Jackson. That's what I do. That's my focus, and that's why I'm on this story. I mean, I have some other reasons for being on the story. I'm an alumnus of Ole Miss myself. I have a great deal of love and for that place, and the place made me into who I am, not only as a journalist but a person. I cover government and politics, and I take very seriously my role as a government reporter as sort of a watchdog for taxpayers. And Glenn Boyce is about to get $300,000 in taxpayer money as part of his salary, no matter what. I know we're about to get into all that, but he is going to receive $300,000 a year in state taxpayer money to do this job. Plus, he's going to have pretty much unlimited access to the university's private jet that is on top of his salary. He's going to live in a house owned by the state of Mississippi or the university. He's going to get to travel in university vehicles. I mean, look, this is a taxpayer question for me at the heart of it. This is not just about we need, as Ole Miss family, we need to figure out what happened. This is a taxpayer thing, and that's why I think this story has had such broad reach. It's not just Oxford and Jackson Ole Miss alumni who are pissed off about this process and have all these questions and want answers to these questions. It's anybody who somewhat keeps up with government and politics in Mississippi, and that's why I think this is really interesting. So, hey, I'm putting this out there right now. For anyone listening to this who knows anything about it, reach out to me, reach out to Chase. Chase and Neil have done great work on this too. Tell a reporter what's going on, because the taxpayers of Mississippi deserve to hear it.
So you transitioned it. Let's just jump into it a little bit. The last day or two, the news coming out, your story on Mississippi Today yesterday titled Ole Miss Foundation College Board Gridlocked Over $500K of new Chancellor Glenn Boyce's salary. And just a little background for people, you can feel free. I'm going to try to give a little clip notes. You can say what I'm missing here in a second. But
sure. Essentially,
every time a chancellor is hired, or just chancellor salary in general, portion comes from the state, portion comes from the foundation of the particular school. It's been pretty 50-50 in the past. Vitter was basically 50-50, 300 from the state, 300 from the foundation. And in this process, even before everybody knew who the chancellor was, the IHL requested the foundation give them $500,000 for the new chancellor's salary. That's a $200,000 increase over Vitter, but it would match the Ole Miss chancellor with what Mark Keenum is making at Mississippi State. And even from the beginning, it drew some question marks because in a lot of ways, not in a lot of ways, in every way, the foundation's responsibility is in the fiduciary way to the university, not to the IHL. It's to act in the best interest of the school. And, I've talked to several board members, their thoughts were, well, why should we cap a number at it? Because, and I'm just using Robbins as an example because he's making 1.1 or 1.2 at Arizona. If it's Bobby Robbins, maybe we need to pay more than $500,000. Well, if it's somebody worse, maybe we don't need to pay $500,000. Let's be flexible. Let's see what's going on. But in conversations I had, it was very clear to the foundation that no, they want this number, and this is exactly the number that they want. As time has passed, that has not happened. it's gotten a little more tense and a little more tense and a little more tense. The foundation has scheduled a meeting for next Friday to talk about it. And look, I think there was a chance at one point where the vote could be kind of close. I think it could have gotten a little squirrely. I think there were three options. There was the option to pay Boyce nothing. That was never going to happen. It was to pay Boyce a different amount for a supplement. And then there was a chance to go ahead and give the $500,000. I do want to get this out of the way off the top. No matter at what point, I think at the end of the day, he was going to get the full $800 no matter what. I can't envision a scenario where that board was going to vote no at the end of the day.
I tend to agree with that. I think, that the reason I thought it was important to publish this story was because it sort of sheds light on some of these concerns that, we've talked about already, some on the podcast today, but, concerns of not just a lowly reporter in Jackson or a sports guy up in Oxford who has a podcast, but concerns of some of the most connected and powerful people affiliated with Ole Miss. And, I like Chase, like you said, I do agree with you. I think at the end of the day, they're going to give him this supplement. They were always going to do that. But the fact that they were questioning it, and more than that, it was this threat, or perceived threat, I should say, on part of some of the foundation board members from the IHL board. I thought it was just important for all of this, as much of this as possible, to be put in the public arena. This isn't easy for anybody to stomach, very clearly. If it were easy, if there wasn't going to be any deliberation, if they were completely okay with, cutting the $500,000 check and moving on and trying to get past it, they wouldn't have reached out to reporters to talk about it,
Right.
So, I think that's important for people to know and understand right now, is that the process and how this hire came about is controversial enough that the most powerful and wealthy individuals, some of them at least, are talking about how they could possibly intervene and keep this from happening. So look, like I said, the reason we published this article wasn't to even suggest, and go read every word. If you can find anywhere where we suggested that it was not going to happen, be my guest, let us know. But this is just part of this. I keep calling it an onion. You just peel the layers back, and like I said earlier, I think people deserve transparency on this, and that's my outlook on everything.
So you spoke of a nuclear option yesterday in the story. For subscribers, I gave a little more background on that on the message board yesterday. And essentially, the IHL, under the affiliate agreement, with the chancellor's support, I guess is the way to put it, has the ability to replace board members. And according to
foundation board members.
Right, foundation board members. And according to those board members, the foundation board members, to myself, to others I've spoken with, they intimated that was something that the IHL, or at least specific members, I think sometimes we get caught up too. The IHL is an entity, but it's 12 individual people that can talk to whomever they want to and say whatever they want to. So it's not always the IHL. Right. It's members of the IHL, or a member of the IHL. Point being, they intimated that there was a path to doing that should that $500,000 be given. So saying that the press release, or whatever you want to call this thing, in the second paragraph, it says any members of the Board of Trustees considering replacing the membership of the governing body of the UN Foundation are simply false. That's not true in any aspect. That's just simply false. Their statement, they're saying that the part that we both focused on for that nuclear option is no longer applicable to the affiliate agreement. I'll kind of let you take over here. What are you hearing on that? Kind of when you saw it this morning, what were your thoughts? I'll kind of let you take me through it.
Yeah, so this IHL press release, I'm like you said, I literally woke up to it. We did get it last night. I was covering the governor's debate in Hattiesburg. We got it during the debate. My editor went into our article and added that line you just read. Any rumors the Board of Trustees considering replacing the membership of the governing board of the UN Foundation are simply false. We added that in our article as soon as we got the press release. There was another portion of that press release we added in the article. So we updated the article as soon as we got that press release, and we added an editor's note to talk about what that update was. Now, the press release itself, I'm pulling it up here just so I have it in front of me so I don't misrepresent what it says in any way. The headline on it, or the title, the subject line, is Clarification from the IHL on Mississippi Today article. So, of course, talking about my article, any rumors that the board is considering replacing membership of foundations are false, whatever. Then, like you said, Chase, they get into this policy change. In our first draft of our article yesterday about the foundation and the IHL board members perhaps signaling a gridlock over the salary supplement, we reported, I'm going to read you the words that we reported. In August, the IHL board voted to remove that provision, talking about the nuclear option, for all subsequent university contracts, but the current language remains in place until January 1st of 2020. Boyce, who's been sitting in on university meetings this week, officially takes office on Sunday, October 13th. So everything that Karen Blanton, the IHL communications director, puts in this press release, we reported in our initial story. I'll also point out that in this press release, she does not specifically cite an error in our reporting. And I think that's key. So when I wake up this morning and I really have time to really drill into what this all means and try to figure out, like, is there actually an inaccuracy in our reporting, I start calling attorneys. As many attorneys as I know who have dealt somewhat with, similar agreements or whatever. And here's the thing, Chase. I said this to you a minute ago, and I'm going to say it now so everybody can hear it. As we know, the IHL board has crazy sweeping power to do pretty much anything they want to in the state. What they absolutely don't have the power to do is sign a contract on behalf of the university foundation for themselves. So as we reported initially in August, the IHL board removed the nuclear option from all of their language in their own IHL policy. What they did not do is nullify directly the contract that exists today between the University of Mississippi and the University of Mississippi Foundation that still includes that language. And in fact, the University Foundation has not signed any new contract affiliation agreement that removes that language. So, as we know, any contract you sign is in place for the duration of the terms listed in that contract. I'm looking at the current affiliation agreement that still is in place. All of that language is still in place, and let's see, the contract that I'm looking at, it's effective on January 1st of 2018, and it was signed December 11th, 2017. As I understand, typically any new affiliation agreement like this would be signed in that December-January period, and that's the January 1st date that we included in our initial reporting. Like I said, we said that it wouldn't take effect until January 1st, 2020. That is what I mean by that. They have not signed a new agreement. So as far as any attorney who I trust to talk to me about this, who has experience in this world, in these very agreements, they say that technically that agreement is in place until a new one is signed. So, which means to me the IHL board right now has the option to use that nuclear option if they want to. Now, what this IHL press release did say, and as we added to our article as soon as we got it last night, any rumors of the Board of Trustees considering replacing the membership of the governing board of UM Foundation are simply false. So they're now on the record saying that's not happening. According to all the attorneys I've spoken to this morning about this, it is still on the table if they want to use it, but at least they're saying now they're not going to use it. So
yeah, I think it was intimated again from specific people to the foundation members to the point that they believed it. But yeah, that's the news in this press release. It's not all the mumbo jumbo about what you said or didn't say. Yep. It's that they're effectively taking it off the table, because at this point it would be, even to the point that the IHL doesn't care about PR, that would be a nightmare. B, it's just a nightmare scenario in general. There's nothing good to come out of that in any way whatsoever if it was activated. And then C, I do think we found the point for the IHL that they do care about PR, because this is not really an olive branch per se, because it still is very high and mighty from a tone standpoint. But what it does do, I think, is it's their effort to turn the heat down a little bit, to lower the temperature, and to say, hey, we're not doing that. Y'all vote. We all know you're probably going to say yes anyway. A lot of the reason for the number is to make it even with Mark Keenum at Mississippi State. And I do think it's also a self-preservation tool in the IHL, because a lot of people that, frankly, had no idea what the IHL did, they kind of operate in secrecy and in plain sight at the same time without anybody really looking at them. I think this gives them a way to back off a little bit, hope that their structure is maintained, because there was at least the thought from a lot of sensible people that typically didn't care about the IHL to think, hey, how can we strip some of this power? Because there is a ton of power there. How can we do this? How can we do that? So I think there was a self-preservation element to this from their angle.
Sure, and look, like, to their credit, that's great. Like, if you're going to put out press releases from here on out, responding to every article that's written, great. Like, yeah. There's some transparency from a body that we have never seen transparency from. So, if this article did anything, that's good. That's a good outcome there. I don't know. Here's the thing. I'm not an attorney. I don't have a law degree. I would never claim to be able to read these things and fully understand without talking to people who are professionals in the legal community. But I think, if, let's say, like, the IHL board reneges on what they've said in this press release, and they go back and they say, yeah, y'all aren't cooperating, we're going to get rid of all of you, and they try to put that in place, I imagine the foundation would sue the IHL. And if it goes to court, like, again, this is worst case. I have not heard that any of this would happen. We're just forecasting this out. If it goes to court, I don't know about, the recent vote from the IHL to remove the language and how that might hold up. I tend to think that a judge or a court of law might look at that and say, well, IHL already voted to remove it. Even though it's not in effect yet, we're still going to abide by what this same body has decided. So, at the end of the day, we could talk about this policy change as much as we wanted, but you're right. I think the news from this press release wasn't about, inaccuracies in an article. It wasn't about the policy change and the semantics of how you look at this policy change. It was that one line: any rumors about the nuclear option being used are simply false.
So I know at some point the faculty senate's going to at least probably attempt a no confidence vote. Boyce is going to take over on Sunday. He's going to get paid what we're talking about him getting paid. What's next? Where's this thing going?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the things I wanted to say, the faculty, I'm interested to see what they do. I think certainly a vote of no confidence is about to be, like, seriously considered and put on the table. But I'm curious to see if it's going to be a vote of no confidence of the IHL or a vote of no confidence of Boyce. Those are two very different things. I think if it's IHL board members will literally laugh and say, have fun in your fantasy land, faculty. If it's a vote of no confidence on Boyce, that's a lot stronger and it's a lot different. Accreditors are watching very closely, of course. I know that with certainty. I know that they're reading every article I write about all this. They're reading all the articles that have been published. And as this story continues to develop, they'll keep that close eye on everything. I don't know this for sure. This press release the IHL sent last night, I kind of read that as you use the term olive branch. I think, certainly it could be perceived that way, and that's maybe part of it. I also thought that it was an effort to say, hey, for the accreditation bodies watching, like, we're not going to actually do this. That's pretty wild. That's obviously getting involved and interfering in the process here that would not be looked favorably on by the accreditation bodies. So, in terms of what's next, I understand the students are probably going to keep protesting. The faculty may do the votes of no confidence. whether that's Boyce or the IHL board. I don't know I don't know about the teeth there. I don't know what real effect that can have long term. I think what has the biggest effect potentially long term is what the accreditation bodies say and think. If we keep reporting this and we find more and more info about the process that doesn't necessarily pass the smell test, those accreditation bodies are going to come investigate the process and how it all went down. They're doing that right now at University of South Carolina. I'll put a little shameless plug here, and we have a podcast in Mississippi Today called The Other Side. It comes out once a week on Monday mornings. Monday's podcast, I did an interview with my friend Andy Shane, who is the Columbia bureau chief at the Post and Courier newspaper in South Carolina. He's been all over the South Carolina president search and how crazy that's been, and he broke the news this week about the accreditation body coming in to investigate the process. We talked a lot about the sort of some parallels between what's going on in Columbia and Oxford, but we also talked about some differences. What we know for sure that the accreditation bodies really, really, really disliked in South Carolina was that South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster personally got involved in that search. We know that because the newspapers over there, did public records requests and proved that he had texted with some trustees about the search process and all that. So that, at the end of the day, I think for the accreditation bodies is the political influences that go into these search processes. So if at any point it becomes clear that there was any sort of political influence here, and that doesn't necessarily mean from a high-ranking government official. That could mean, conservative-minded IHL board members acting on behalf or acting at the encouragement of people in politics or people formerly in politics. That could be considered by the accreditation bodies, according to their recent precedent, something that they might want to come take a closer look at. So I don't know. I mean, faculty vote of no confidence on Boyce might raise the attention of the accreditation bodies as well. But I don't know, Chase. I mean, your guess is as good as mine on what's coming next. I don't know. I tend to think that the foundation is going to give Boyce his salary supplement. I tend to think the students and faculty are going to continue to try to do what they can, but I'm not sure ultimately what that means. The big deal here would be the accreditation bodies.
You've spoke to him. You have some relationship with Boyce, obviously, at this point. And let's you can consider the noise, consider where he's starting from. Just your opinion, maybe even as an alumnus as much as a reporter at this point. What kind of shot do you give him to have a successful tenure at this point, given everything going on? What do you think?
I'll start by telling you that I asked him that question in my interview. I mean, I said, there's a lot going on. Like, how are you going to do this? And, he didn't necessarily directly answer the question. He just said, I see it as a challenge. I've always been drawn to challenges, and, I love this place. I love the people here, and I'm going to prove to them as quickly as I can that I'm the right leader at the right time. As a reporter who's been going very much out of my way to get as many perspectives from stakeholders as possible in the past week or so, especially, it's going to be tough for him. It's going to be tough to let's start on campus, right? So the students, I think it's important, to a lot of people, a lot of students to make their voices heard. Activism on a public university campus is sort of vital to the framework of that community. But there's not a lot students can do, I don't think, to change any minds or to change any decision. Maybe they can prove me wrong on that, but faculty is the big deal. I haven't found a single faculty member on that campus who has said anything close to, I think that Boyce can earn our respect over time. Let's look at this from a business standpoint. If you manage a staff of people, let's say you are the boss of 10 people, and even 9 of those 10 people are going into your realm of leadership under the notion that they will never respect you, it's never going to work out. There's a level of trust there that won't be coming from the faculty to Boyce, but because of the nature of this and how public it's been, I think Boyce won't ever fully trust the faculty either. And I mean, I don't know that for sure. I'm not in his head. I can't speak for him, but it's hard to look at this any other way. You know, I talked to some faculty members and even some administrators and former administrators on campus about what this means for the national reputation of the university in terms of academics. So, you know, a big job comes open, say, I don't know, a provost job comes open in the next year or two, and Boyce is chancellor. You know, one of the first things that any potential applicant is going to do is look up the background and history of who their boss would be. And they're going to Google Glenn Boyce, and they're going to see all this stuff about the process and how questionable it was. And anybody who's worth their weight would come into that interview process and ask, what's all this about? And, you know, some faculty members pointed out to me, a lot of people are going to see that and say, I'm not even going to apply for that job. You know, that's the effect of the academic side, or at least potentially. The alumni side, I mean, Chase, you might have been more in contact with the alumni just by the nature of what you do. I mean, I have not heard much from a lot of the traditional big donors on campus who feel comfortable with where we're at right now. And, you know, I think donors have a different relationship with the university than professors or administrators do, of course. You know, it's different. It's an ongoing relationship. It's something that you can work over time. You don't have to, Boyce doesn't have to go sit down with the top donor this week and win them over right then. You know, it's a process. That's how fundraising works. I don't know. I mean, general alumni base, you know, somebody put this up on Twitter. Hamp Hickman put this on Twitter yesterday, I saw. He pointed out, you know, Boyce was not introduced formally at the football game on Saturday. He was hired Friday, or announced he was hired Friday, and the very next day at the homecoming game, when traditionally, you know, you might want to make an announcement, honor him on field so everybody can be happy and get on the same page. That didn't happen. And that, honestly, I mean, as Hamp put that on Twitter, man, I think that was a good point. It's telling that the powers that be decided that wasn't the best move for right now. And, you know, whether that's going to be their continued approach to Boyce or not, we'll see. I mean, they can't keep him in the shadows forever here. I mean, he's going to have to start getting to work and trying to build back some of these relationships. But to answer your question, I mean, it's a really long, windy answer, but to answer your question, it's going to be tough for him. He knows that. He's very aware of that. He, like I said, he thinks it's a challenge, and he's looking forward to that challenge, but it's not a good situation.
Yeah, if I'm advising him from a faculty and staff standpoint, it's get in front of him and take it. Time's all that's going to happen. Take it, listen to him, let him, whatever. I mean, you know, you got to do that. I mean, I thought, even if he, and look, and there's probably a very good reason for this. I have no idea. But even yesterday, you know, Noah Wilkins speaking to a lot of the academic deans, Boyce needed to be in that room and doing something. You got to get some voices out. You got to start the first impression, or at least the second impression, going in a little different direction. From that standpoint, needs to be calling donors. I know he hasn't talked to a ton of donors to this point. Needs to be talking to donors where he calls and asks to meet with them, not a scheduler, not an assistant, anything like that. It's got to be a really face-to-face process that it's just going to take some time. I mean, he's going to be the chancellor, so you got to start those efforts right now. And even though it's a little reactive, he's got to find a way to give this $87,000 back. I think that would make a huge step with a lot of people to just remove that part of the equation, if you will. I think that needs to happen. And then, you know, for a lot of the fans, and just being real here, because, you know, I think he called it the front porch. We always called it the front door. People be really happy with his athletic director hire, whomever that might be, whether it's Keith or somebody else. That'll make a lot of the fans happy. Just keep it real.
Yeah, man. Like I've been covering not necessarily sports related stuff at Ole Miss, but you know, I wrote about, I broke the story about the noose and the flag being hung around the neck of the James Meredith statue. Wrote the story about the students who disrupted the Laramie Project to play the Ole Miss Theater Foundation put on. When, you know, some of the freshman football players were in that theater when the cast got real upset and they were being heckled and all that. You know, I'm a student of history. You know, look back this is the most extreme example that we could possibly point back to at Ole Miss, but 1962, all of these things, these really bad things, are always at Ole Miss. It's uncanny how this works. Football or athletic success can always negate problems like this. Like 1962, there was a damn riot on the campus. Like, people died on a Sunday, and the following Saturday was the homecoming game. I think we played Houston, and we won. And, you know, the riot stuff really sort of took a back seat to the success of the football program, at least internally. I think nationally it was a different perception, of course. But, look, you know, like, win on Saturday, win next week, the next home game against A&M, get to 6 wins this season, people are going to stop thinking as much about Glenn Boyce and the challenge that he faces as chancellor, and they're going to start thinking more about, you know, the things that, for better or for worse, mean a lot to Mississippians. So we'll see.
Yeah, you got to fix it from a faculty standpoint. That's A1. You got to keep that. You got to make sure you don't lose R1 status. You got to make sure of all those things beyond anything else. But for the other segment, I really think that's as big as anything, because look, a lot of sports fans, they might know who the chancellor is, know the president, and who their respective school. I'm not talking Ole Miss in general or in specifically. They have no idea what they're doing every day and don't care. Just keep everything in good standing, keep everything between the lines, and win in the athletic events. That's the way it works. So,
and you, Chase, you could speak to this better than anybody, but I mean, we're coming off the heels of the NCAA mess that a lot of Ole Miss fans thought was handled poorly by the administration. You know, that we don't have a permanent athletic director. It's a big deal. And yeah, you're right. You're completely spot on about all that.
So, last couple things. I've kept you probably longer than I meant to. Just quickly, cut 2 or 3 minutes here. You were there last night. What were sort of the couple impressions of the debate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm. It's weird. I've been sort of. I was pulled off of my main sort of beat or coverage area, which was the governor's race, to start covering all this Ole Miss stuff as it blew up. I think, you know, it's important in light of this conversation about the chancellor search and the IHL. Whoever is elected governor in less than a month now is going to get to appoint 4 new board members, I think in 2021. Some people have said 2020, but I think it's actually going to be 2021. You know, I asked both of the candidates before the debate last night. It did come up at the debate, and I'll get to that in a second. But I ended up asking both candidates about their thoughts on this, and sort of in light of the building controversy at Ole Miss with the chancellor search and with these IHL moves kind of in the shadows, what are your thoughts on how, not only how to approach an IHL appointment, but who you might seek out in those positions? Let me read you the statements. We haven't published the story yet, so whoever's listening to this can get a little head start on the story that we're going to be publishing. But here's the statement that I got from Jim Hood himself. I will have a nominating committee to review all applicants for all appointments. They'll be made up of a diverse group of men and women. In appointments to IHL, I will be looking for people with experience in education and education administration. Fairly straightforward. You know, he says, that was Jim Hood. He says, you know, in particular, as it relates to IHL, we're going to be looking for educators or people with education administration experience. Here's a statement from the Reeves campaign. The governor's appointment power is one of the most important reasons why Mississippians should elect Tate Reeves and defeat Jim Hood. It goes all the way to the top. Both our U.S. senators were appointed, and that makes a big difference in who sits on the U.S. Supreme Court. Jim Hood would make appointments that Nancy Pelosi will love, but Donald Trump will hate. Tate will appoint conservatives, and Hood will appoint liberals. To be clear, my question, the same question I asked to both of them was, if elected, how would you decide who to appoint to the IHL board, and what are your general impressions of the magnitude of those appointments, given the recent controversy at the University of Mississippi? You know, Hood talked about IHL directly. He talked about what he would look for in candidates. Reeves didn't. You know, he talked more about the general power of appointments and how it, you know, plays into politics, and he drops Nancy Pelosi's name and Trump's name and all that. You know, that's been the long-standing strategy from Tate Reeves in this whole governor's race about every single issue is Jim Hood's a liberal. He loves Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. And Hood has, you know, anybody who watched that debate last night would say the same thing about Hood. Hood went after Tate maybe even harder than Tate went after Hood during the debate. But, Hood has at least, tried to focus on policy ideas and proposals. And, that's been the case since he announced his campaign in October of 2018 from the Houston courthouse steps. So we'll see, man. I think that certainly, like, without question, a lot of Ole Miss people who have been really fired up about this chancellor search have started to kind of cast their eyes towards this governor's race. And, I don't know what that means. I don't know how they might fall, but, I thought these two answers to the same exact question from Hood and Reeves were pretty telling.
It's also interesting for Hood, just kind of a policy change. They're talking about education experience because and this isn't a shot at all, but there are medical doctors on the board, but there's really not a lot of education experience people on the board, if there's any. So that is kind of a change on how things would go from an IHL appointment standpoint. So just kind of to wrap here, anything I didn't ask you, any last thing you want to say before we go?
I do want to say this, and I'm sure some people listening to this will roll their eyes at this, but Chase, I know you've gotten it. I've seen some of this. I've certainly gotten a lot of response from my coverage too. Mixed bag, but I think a vast majority of the responses to all the reporting on this has been, thank you for looking into this. It's good that, there's people looking out to sort of tell this story and to dig and to get this out there. Journalists a lot of times these days get a bad rap. A lot of times that's deserved, to be quite honest with you. As a journalist, I take very seriously the ability to not only receive criticism, but to hear it and understand it. But I guess what I just kind of wanted to mention here is that I hope that our reporting on this, whether you agree with the process or whether you like Boyce or not or whatever, I hope all of our reporting, not just my reporting, but every reporter who's been on this story, hope that sort of sheds some light on the importance of transparency in government and shine some light on the importance of openness and honesty when it comes to something that so many people care so deeply about. And, I mentioned earlier, this is a taxpayer thing for me, first and foremost. This is a very powerful, well-paid position that has a lot of prominence in the state, and that means a lot as a reporter for me to sort of hold people accountable there. But I don't know. I mean, I keep giving us criticism, keep saying what you want. That, again, that's part of what we do, and that's what we need to hear to continue to be better and to be fair and as balanced as possible. But look, we're not always bad guys here. We're doing this because most people don't have the ability to ask these questions directly to the people in power. They don't have the ability to spend hours on end trying to search through documents or read through emails or whatever it might be. So thank y'all. Anybody listening who's reached out with words of encouragement, thank you. Anybody who wants to criticize, thank you for that too, and I mean that. That's what journalism is. I think that's so important to government and transparency, and just wanted to mention that. I hate to sound preachy, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about, especially the last couple of weeks.
Appreciate it, bud. We will, I'm sure, be in touch, and if anything else crazy happens, love to get you back on again.
Thanks so much, Chase. Y'all are doing great work. Let's keep it up.